Hi, I'm Lisa,
And I'm Johnny.
and today we're going to talk about movies
Horror movies, to be exact.
because this is Gutted, and that's what we do.
Yes, so the movie that we will be talking about, as those of you who are watching the video version of this, is on our table here. You can see on our computer screen. We're going to be talking about the movie The Voices from the year 2014. Not too far long ago, but really surprised how under the radar it was. But you may have heard of it. If you haven't, you might be surprised by who's starring in this too.
Right.
Ryan Reynolds, for one.
Ryan Reynolds.
Yes. Gemma Arterton, who was actually a name I didn't recognize until I did some research afterwards and realized she was in a movie I didn't really like because I'm a big Bond fan. She was in Quantum of Solace. They kind of do a throwback to the whole Goldfinger, where one of the first victims of the movie was entirely painted in gold and she suffocated. They kind of go back to that in that role. But anyways, I recognized her from that. I knew I'd seen her somewhere, but I just didn't know her. Another household name here, we have Anna Kendrick.
She was quite the delightful surprise watching this movie because I didn't know anything about it either.
Yeah.
It was so under the radar, and I had not seen any promotions for it at all. The best promotion probably that film had was years after its release on Netflix, and it was just sitting on my suggested watch list, and I kept running into it over and over and over, looking at Ryan Reynolds' face in the movie poster, and I was like, you know what? Sure, why not?
Why not?
I like him as an actor. Put the movie on, had no idea what to expect. I saw Anna Kendrick pop up. I'm like, holy shit.
How
many A-listers are in this film, this little indie horror flick?
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
I know. I was equally surprised at that. I'm glad you kind of passed it along to me to say to check it out. Watching the trailer, too, it's very deceiving, I guess you could say.
It's entirely deceiving.
If you watch the trailer before you watch this, you think you're going to be running into this really kind of rom-com with some dark comedy, maybe.
Like maybe it's a little quirky, a little weird. It is all of those things, but so much more.
Yeah. Watching this, I was, just super surprised. Like, I guess I'll just go ahead and just talk about it. The gore in it. There's plenty of gore, right?
I would say the thing that got me, so gore, yes. Sound effects, double yes.
Oh, yes. Indeed.
They were so good at
Yeah.
finding all of the nuances of what the human body can do after death, depending on the manipulator.
Right. And speaking of that, we probably should go into a little bit of the plot and what it's actually about.
Right.
So our star, Ryan Reynolds, great acting chops. Like, I've always thought he was a good actor, and he plays this really awkward guy, but he really has a side to him that he really hides well. But you could still tell he's quirky. So he works in this like factory
For tubs, like packing and manufacturing tubs.
Yeah. And the movie, I think, does a great job of really making it a very pleasant, colorful scenes to make you kind of put you in that mode that like, oh, this is a very bright and sort of lighthearted thing we're about to watch.
And it's hard not to feel that way because the manufacturing plant, as a design element of the film, their uniforms are this Pepto pink.
Yeah.
This bubblegum pink.
Yeah, I could see in the movie poster, he's wearing this like jumpsuit that's all pink.
So you have so many characters in the film, especially in the department he works in, which is packing and shipping. They're all wearing this bubblegum pink outfit. And so you get this sort of tone and mood that it's just a quirky indie film. And how weird could it really get?
Right.
And then you have Ryan Reynolds, who is so brilliant in his delivery, like his timing, his overall just acting chops, like you said. Like you love the guy right at the beginning because he's so low key charming and witty, and just I feel like the character was written for him.
Yeah.
But I always feel that way about characters he plays.
Because I think he just does such a good job at playing that type of like quirky, funny.
Yeah, he just makes that character his, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so when you're getting all of these things combined, the indie feel, the costuming, Ryan Reynolds' delivery, you're just so blindsided by what's going to happen next, because the reality of the story is that his character is suffering from schizophrenia.
I read somewhere where like it can be categorized. He has 3 different things, schizophrenia being one of them.
Yeah, the biggest thing. And he's supposed to be on medication. Right?
Yes.
And this whole like life of his of just working in a packing plant, like this is a big step for him.
Yeah.
He got out of some kind of facility.
Yeah.
And he's court ordered to go see a psychiatrist regularly, and she checks up on how well he's adjusting. And at this point in the film, he's doing quite well. He's got a job.
Yeah.
He's got would you call it an apartment?
Kind of.
He's got
a loft
suitable
of some sort.
living quarters because he lives above an abandoned bowling alley.
Right, which was kind of interesting. I watching it a second time around, I was trying to think if there's some symbolism behind that. I guess you can kind of come up with your own take on it, but I think it was just a random choice. The way I've kind of
I've only seen the movie twice.
Yeah.
The first time, which was the total surprise, like, sure, Netflix, I will watch what you're suggesting to me. And the second time was to prepare for this episode. And when I was thinking about his choices and where he's living, he chooses a very unique placement. It's on the outskirts of town. It's not near anybody.
Right.
He's, it's not like a house where you belong in a neighborhood but still have your independence. Like, he's legit on his own somewhere, like leaving town. Like, there's not even a market or a school or an apartment complex or even a nearby neighborhood. Like, he's up against the woods.
Right.
And he chooses this as his place for living. It's almost like a subconscious choice on his part, right?
Yeah.
To alienate himself and isolate himself away from everyone else for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, it does a really good job of introducing him as a character. He's quirky right off the bat. Like, there's no secret to it. He gets super excited about the smallest things, like being invited to do a volunteer thing at work. Like, he's like, oh, I can't wait to do the conga line or something like that.
Oh, yeah, he's super excited about something so simple.
Yeah, and that's, so you're like, okay, this guy's really quirky. But then you see the scenes that start to unveil here. Like, okay, he's going to that psychiatrist, as you mentioned. She's constantly asking him, are you on your medication? Are you taking the medication you need to? And he's saying, yeah. And then he ends up going home. And one of the bigger parts of the movie, that reoccurring themes, is that he actually speaks to his pets.
And not how, like, you or I would speak to our pets. His pets speak back.
Full-on conversations.
And
they speak back, yep.
It's the cat and the dog.
The cat and the dog.
Mr. Whiskers.
Mr. Whiskers is the cat, and Bosco is the dog, I believe.
The dog.
Bosco.
And, of course, the cat is the evil one of the two, and the dog is the good boy.
Right. And that's exactly how he sounds to the dog. And the cat has a Scottish accent for some reason.
Yeah, for some weird reason, but it works.
But it's also like, it's very thick accent, and I was really surprised to find out after the fact that Ryan Reynolds voiced both of them.
Yeah, he wasn't supposed to either.
He wasn't supposed to, yeah.
The director was gonna hire a couple of voice actors to take on those roles, and Ryan Reynolds was really getting into his character, and since those animals are supposed to be them speaking is supposed to be from his own mind because he suffers from schizophrenia, it should be Ryan Reynolds to do those voices. So he actually had to do a recording doing each of the voices, pitch it to the director in order to sell it so that he could do that. And then it was so good, the director said, and we have the magic that is the voices.
It's already there. You don't have to go looking for someone to do the voices either, It's, what a convenient setup for them in the filming process,
Seriously.
Right? Yeah, casting and all that. And I guess Ryan Reynolds has a friend that's Scottish, so he was able to
he just modeled it after him. I wonder how his friend feels though, being the evil character.
I know, right? Yeah,
the evil voice.
Like, oh, great, the evil cat, of course. But kind of, immediately I thought about the classic like devil and angel on the shoulder,
absolutely,
but in the form of the pets. So, but I thought it was a really neat thing, and
the crazy thing about that though is like as an audience member, like you don't get that right away.
No.
And I'm sorry if we're spoiling it, but I mean, you came here for a reason.
Right. Exactly. Yes. To find out more.
The beauty of watching is like, you're not sure what kind of movie you walked into. We know it's indie. We know it's a little weird, could the animals actually really be talking? None of that stuff has been established for us.
No.
But when you get to the point in the film where the voices, when they're talking back to him, are like, yeah, we're just you, right? We're the voices in your head. Like, it's kind of like a what the fuck moment that you feel along with the character when he makes that realization for himself that it's been him this entire time.
Yeah. Totally. And there are so many shifts in this movie, like turns that the movie takes that surprised me. And I loved, and I kind of I'm going back to what I said earlier about the trailer, just being totally shocked and like blindsided by every turn this movie took to show something, the next extreme of his character. And of course, with that being, when he goes out with the British girl from The Office, Gemma Arterton, who plays the character from The Office, and she kind of, she can tell he's quirky and doesn't want to go out with him, but ultimately, with the turn of events, they end up that they're driving in his truck together or his vehicle together, and then they go out to the forest, and you see this scene in the trailer too, but she's running through the forest, and at that moment, after what happens in that scene, I'm like, dang, this is crazy. And this, speaking back to his acting, just the whole thing, like the lines he kept saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And you believe him.
Stabbing.
You believe him.
Yeah. And you believe him. And it's like, and you see that in his character where he's having that internal struggle, like, this is so wrong, but I'm doing it. And I actually am sorry,
stop.
But you see like in his face, he's in a weird way in his eyes, like he's kind of enjoying it too. You know what I mean? Like that contrast.
Yeah. That's a difficult thing to pull off, but it's very jarring. It's very unsettling because that's the moment in the film that you realize you probably shouldn't like his character very much.
Yeah.
But you can't help it.
You can't. And they've established him to be this likable guy for like the first quarter of the movie or so. And you're like, you're invested in him and you're like, oh, I do feel really bad for him. But he's like killing people now. So, it's crazy how the storytelling aspect can manipulate your moral standpoint in that sense.
Absolutely. And it's, what it reminds me of? May,
which we did.
We
already,
did do a review on May. And the thing about Ryan Reynolds is like, you want him, because he's always playing these roles that are very, just very charming, right? Irresistible kind of guy. And it's hard to believe that he's not that at all.
Right.
And he has to sell that part, right? He has to sell that awkwardness really well. And he does. And you feel it when you get to these like really jarring moments where he's having this disconnect with societal norms. Like he doesn't understand boundaries and rules and like customs, because he finds himself a part of his work, friends, and they go to a dinner, right? And they're having this conversation, and it's very normal, and they're just talking about life and work. And, our British character, she's talking about how she ended up in the country and, but she ended up single and it's kind of tragic. Oh, here I am. And I'm thinking maybe it's time to go back to England. And it's very, very quiet for a while. And then out of nowhere, he's just like shoveling his mouth full of food, and he's the only one eating that way. And then he just goes, I know karate.
Like totally off topic, nothing to do with what they're talking about. And not soon thereafter, everyone's like, "Oh, well, look at the time," or kind of like,
and he has no clue.
No,
he's just lost in this daily nuance of understanding how to interact with people. And it was the same thing with May. We're seeing this same misunderstanding, this innocence kind of just not fucking getting it and just not having the tools to get it.
Yeah.
And when I think about that and I think about this character, and I just have to wonder what a universe would look like if he and May
we're in
got
the same,
together.
Oh, that would be interesting.
It's almost like they were made for each other, and I would love to see some fanfic.
That would be, I'm totally with you there. That would be amazing, actually. They have a lot of similarities, and I think they would get along, but could end in a bloodbath.
It'd be like Bonnie and Clyde, like a horror Bonnie and Clyde.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Of social awkwardness and murdering.
Right, yeah, and so just, the movie itself, though, seeing that psychological back and forth, they do a really good job throughout it. And the one scene that comes to mind, too, that I think is one of my favorite parts is when he ultimately decides, because he hadn't been taking the medication,
Right.
and he ultimately decides to do it. And of course, the cat, being the evil devil on his shoulder, is like, you're going to hate what you see or what you're going to be when you take those pills. And the dog is kind of like, you got to take them, right? He's kind of like,
you need to take them.
You need to take them. So he ends up taking them, and it's really cool what happens.
Yeah, well, one of the things that okay, so the big push, the catalyst that made him decide to take his pills was the new voice that popped up in his fridge.
Yes, the new voice.
So, okay, so we gotta rewind a little bit.
Okay,
I want to go back. I want to go back
sure.
to when you were mentioning our British character. She's running through the woods. Well, he was supposed to take her on a date, and they kind of pseudo end up in the car doing this drive to a restaurant to get some food, and it's very friendly and light, and you're so happy for him because he's finally like having this one-on-one session with the girl of his dreams, essentially. And the conversation goes weird for a second because he wants to play a game and talk about like what was his question?
It was like a
can you
Bible
name all
trivia
the
kind of
Bible
thing?
trivia?
Yeah,
Can you name all the angels or something like that?
Yeah, the archangels.
And in the middle of this, right when you feel that things are taking this sort of innocent but weird turn, they smack full on into a deer.
A deer, yes. Goes through the windshield.
Through the fucking windshield.
And it's amazing that, for how his character just doesn't, obviously is shocked, but still maintains that thought process of what they were just talking about. Like that wasn't.
Yeah, he could hold on to it. He wasn't thrown out of the moment like most people would be.
Right.
So while they're looking at this deer that's been it's still alive and it's suffering. It's suffering.
It's suffering, yes.
And it's bleeding all over the dashboard. His companion is freaked out, staring at it like, what do we do? What do we do? And he just... What does he do next? He pulls out a knife,
which he just has on him, I guess.
For some random reason. And it's not like a little pocket knife or a protection knife. It's like
heavy duty, like almost combat knife. It's huge.
It's like half a machete.
And the deer is also speaking to him, saying, "End it now, or kill me." Yeah,
and then he starts this. He starts talking back to it or something, and it's like, are you suffering? It's in pain. Okay. And of course, his companion's only hearing one side of this conversation.
Right.
And right there in the vehicle, he slits the deer's throat and then starts back up in the conversation he left off in.
Yeah.
And the first thing that pops out of his mouth is Lucifer.
Yeah, exactly. I think he says the fourth angel's Lucifer, because I guess she didn't, he was naming them off before the crash, and then they didn't get to that one. So hearing that after he just sliced the throat of the deer, I do not blame her for exiting the vehicle and running.
Yeah, she takes off running. I mean, how scared do you have to be in the middle of nowhere? You don't know where you are. You're not dressed properly. You don't have. It's dark.
No, yeah.
And you just take off running in the woods.
I think his comment was too, as he's running after, is stop running, you're gonna get lost.
He's trying to be helpful.
He's trying to be helpful in that moment of his conflict.
And you kind of, as an audience member, at least for me, I felt like really worried for him. It was a very strange emotion because it was this, no, it's not as bad as it looks. Oh no, everything's spiraling out of control. He's not really like that. I feel bad for him now because there's no way that she's going to come back from this. But how does he correct this? And then that moment goes away when he falls on her, tackles her.
Yeah.
And stabs her.
And I almost looking back at that scene the second time, I was wondering if it was an accident initially, because he stumbles over her.
I don't think so.
And she immediately spits up blood. And knowing, I'm no expert by any means on wounds or anything, but I feel I do know at least that if you're stabbed in the lung, that does generate a lot of blood coming out of your throat. So I'm assuming that's what happened. They don't show it in that greater detail, although when he does the following acts of stabbing her some more, it gets very graphic. But he's just, and the common theme too I noticed throughout the movie, not only with killing her but his other victims, he justifies it by thinking that they're suffering.
Right.
And whether that's physical pain they're suffering from, which most case it is, you do get flashbacks of why the way he is to a certain extent. And ultimately you find out about his character and the background of it, his mom being the huge one that I think is just one of the most awful situations to be in, where the medical teams starting to approach their house. You can see a flashback and she's just like, end it for me, end it. And I guess there's like a knife or something nearby,
It's
right?
broken glass.
Broken glass,
And
that's what
she
it is,
tried
yeah.
to do that. She also suffered from the same mental illnesses that he also suffers from. And she was about to be taken away. He must have been all but 12
or something.
and she could not. She said it over and over. I can't go back there. And she tries to slit her own throat. She wants to kill herself, but she can't do it. So she gets her 12-year-old son to do it.
Jeez, yeah.
And he has to make the decision in that moment whether to let the authorities take her away or to honor her dying wish or her last wish and do it for her. And so when the authorities arrive, all they see, they don't know anything that happened. All they see is that this kid is holding this bloody piece of glass and there's his mom dead in her bed. And so his background is extremely tragic, and he definitely has like layers of trauma that he has to work through, while at the same time having somewhat debilitating illnesses.
Right. Doesn't help the situation.
It doesn't help the situation. And so there's this definitely this connection of, are you suffering? I need to help you. I need to put you out of your misery, because it all comes back to that moment with his mother.
Yeah.
So when we're watching that as an audience member, it's very heartbreaking. And a lot of horror movies that I'm noticing, especially as we do these episodes, is that they're rooted in trauma, in tragedy, in heartbreak, in neglect, loneliness.
Yeah.
And this is how we get some of the uglier sides of humanity, when we discard people or we forget about them or we don't treat them with dignity.
Right.
The ugly side of humanity is that we flip out, and it has these nasty repercussions if we don't practice self-care and care for others and just a certain level of compassion.
Yeah, it's true. And that's kind of evident in his work environment. I think for the most part, if you look at where he was working and his boss treated him okay, some people treat him okay, but underneath it all, I forgot what department the other people were in, but they kind of have this sort of like, standoffish attitude towards him.
Snobby.
They're snobby, yeah. So, that just because he's different, and there was no indication at that time that they should have, it wasn't justified or anything. But even then, though, like all the behind the scenes stuff. So when he takes the pills and you see how you as an audience get to see what his room actually looks like, his house actually looks like, the real life vision of what he's going through,
right.
Bloody countertops in his kitchen, things like that.
Well, yeah. And so coming back to that, when he takes his medication, his solution to killing this girl in the woods is to go back and retrieve the body.
Yeah.
And, we saw her die as the audience, right? In the film, we see her die, and she spit up blood, and he stabs her multiple times.
Yeah.
All while saying he's sorry.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre.
Yeah.
But when he goes back to get her, she's clean.
Yeah.
She is pristine.
Yeah.
There is no blood.
No blood on her or anything.
She might as well be Sleeping Beauty at that point.
Yeah,
or
they
Snow
made a
White
point
or
to
something.
really illuminate her and make sure she was, perfect, like makeup, just
And that tells you. So the first time I watched it, it was very confusing because it's like, what is happening? But you realize later it's because his perspective, he's choosing, or somehow his brain is manipulating his reality for him by showing him the things that are easier to process, or what he prefers things to look like. So he's not seeing the blood. He's not seeing this mess.
Yeah.
But he picks her up. He takes her. He throws her in his truck. Doesn't have a windshield at this point.
No, he just driving around with no windshield. Yeah.
with the body in the back, and he stops by the store to get the biggest fucking bulk set of Tupperware I've ever seen, and a hacksaw kit or something. Like, where did he go? Did he go to fucking Costco for that?
Yeah, I know, right? It's like a superstore in this town that they're
this
in.
like Midwestern tiny town, and the sheriff even swings by.
He's like, hey, what are you up to? What happened to your truck?
Oh, hit a deer. And
so nonchalant about it.
Yeah, and then he goes home and he takes care of business, right? And what's alarming is that you get all these sound effects. Oh my God, they took so much care with the sound effects.
That's true.
The squishy sawing.
Yeah, that was very cringy.
Wet sounds. And you see, just body parts just kind of barely out of the frame, just wiggling as he's sawing. Holy smokes. Yeah. And he's methodically figured out how to fit body parts and pieces into the Tupperware. And he's taken a whole human body. And the Tupperware is only about, I don't know, what would you say, like 6 inches by like 4 inches.
You can get.
No,
for
not
some
by.
Reason he didn't get those.
Like what you would take for lunch to work or something. And then he just starts stacking them up like bricks, like a brick wall, until he's almost like, it almost looks like he's walling himself in behind this it's bloody trophy.
Yeah, you just see little pieces of flesh in each one. And you may see too online, we were looking earlier, just like some of the promotional stuff that they did at the time, but one of the posters is you see some heads in the fridge. And automatically looking at that, it's just, you think, what the heck is this? What movie could this possibly be about? Like, why are there heads in the fridge? And she talks to him too.
Because that's the thing he couldn't break down, right?
Right.
He had to keep it. And so he takes her head and he puts it in the fridge. And he's like trying to take a breath, and he's got like blood smears on his fridge. The saw he used, like a bone saw or something, is just hanging out in the sink. His cutting board is a mess. Everything's just disastrous in his house. And he hears a voice coming from the fridge.
Yeah, that's right.
And he opens it, and she's talking to him.
Yeah. And her face is fine too. Even for being severed, it's just her. She looks, like.
And she's in a good mood.
Yeah, she's kind of like.
She's like, Jerry.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
And she tells him to take the medication.
Yeah, that's right.
There's this like really interesting moment where this character this new voice in his head shouts at him, take his medication, take it now. And so he just like puts a handful in his hand, pops him back, and swallows him down, and then he goes to sleep. He falls asleep on his couch. And when he wakes up, it is one of the most shocking moments, I think, in the entire film for me. It was very unsettling, super surreal, and like I had walked into just a different film.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because just how grimy, dirty his apartment was. He didn't even clean up the blood from the victim. He
doesn't even clean up after his pets.
No, his pets. Yeah, exactly. It's
filthy. Like defecating all over the floor.
It's disgusting. Yeah,
and like he just lack of awareness, lack of just maintenance, just basic things that we all learn how to do as adults. And at that point, he hates what he sees. He can't come to terms with the mess. Yeah. And the reality, and so he throws all his pills out.
Yeah, he just doesn't want to deal with the reality of it.
Yeah.
And that's and I actually saw some clips online on YouTube, and it's really, like I mentioned in the last episodes, I just kind of like looking at the comments, and some people have really neat takes on it. But someone said that this is one of the best films to display like what mental illness is about, like what people experience, especially with that scene. That's like the culminating scene where like people, they don't want the reality of what they realize their impact is on society or their family or their personal lives. This is the most extreme case, obviously.
Yeah, seriously.
But it's still a kind of an interesting look into what people could perhaps go through with mental illness. So that's another component of this film that could be easily overlooked if you're just seeing it for face value of what it is.
Yeah.
But so and that's that was the one of my favorite scenes, and how they just accomplished that with the acting, the scene, and everything.
Just even the filming, because it was it almost had this handheld feel to give you a disorienting feel,
Yeah.
to put you in his shoes. Because, I mean, if you woke up like that, if you, honest to God, did not have any idea that that was your reality and you woke up to that, you wouldn't want to be there either.
No. Yeah.
It's so much preferable to go back to the way things were. And so when he throws out all of his pills, I think he even tries to throw them up the next morning. Like, he's got a clean apartment. His animals are happy.
Yeah.
Her head, her mood is happy. And she agrees with him.
Again.
She's like, yeah, that was rubbish. Those pills, you don't need those pills. And then it just starts to get more and more intense, right?
It just kind of, it spirals out of control, everything kind of goes downhill from there. And ultimately it gets out of hand. And it's interesting how we're talking about this movie and it just seems so grimy and you're like, oh gosh, like it's so depressing, and in its own right it is, but it still somehow maintains this lighthearted dark comedy this whole time.
Absolutely.
It's like, how does it, and I think, it's just amazing how that it does that.
I think it trades off with with his medication, when he takes the medication, when he doesn't take the medication, depending on whose perspective we're seeing the story from, because there's some parts where we're seeing it from like Anna Kendrick's perspective.
Right, which we haven't even got to yet. But
yeah. And I love what she represents, and there's just an extra, I mean, ultimately it turns into an extra layer of tragedy.
It's just so sad because they start to connect.
And you really want it to go somewhere. And her character is sweet, open, kind. She sees his offbeat personality and is not thwarted by it.
No, she's very accepting to what he is, especially when they go to his childhood home.
Oh, man. Yeah. And you know what? She handles her as a character. She was a very strong female character. And I was really happy with how she was written, because until the very end, she was a survivor. Yeah. 100%. And when they go on their date, everything's going great. Everything's perfect. They're having a cute, first date, and then he decides he wants to go somewhere, and suddenly they're driving down a dirt road and it's really dark and not cute anymore.
And as a viewer, you're like, oh, okay, here we go.
But she has no idea, but she's just kind of taking things in stride. She's not like our British counterpart. She's not jumping to conclusions. She's just kind of taking it one step at a time. And they end up at his childhood home, where we get a lot of flashbacks about his childhood. And it's an abandoned house, and he starts talking about, he starts getting a little real. He talking about his mother dying, and he gets emotional, and she just opens up to him and sees everything that he's going through, and is like, it's gonna be okay. I'm here for you. She doesn't get freaked out. She doesn't run off. And in that moment, you think there's a little bit of redemption for him. Yeah. Because you don't notice until the camera and the production and the film show you what he was planning. I mean, you kind of get a sense of it. But it's not until they walk away and he puts the knife out of you. He's been holding on to it. He's been
holding on to the knife, behind his back.
Behind his back. Yeah. And then she leads him out of the house, and he subtly leaves it behind in the house, and you're like, oh my God, is this going to be one of these moments? Was that truly symbolic of him leaving his childhood trauma behind, and with it, its side effects or its residue, right, in his life of this murderous intent? So are we seeing some symbolism where he puts the knife down, he leaves it in his childhood home, he's going to make strides to overcome all of that. And we're hopeful for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Oh gosh, the most heartbreaking part of this whole thing, I think, is when she decides to surprise him and give him a gift or something at his house, after work hours. They hit it off, as we were talking about. But I think that's just, one of the most heartbreaking things. Oh gosh, he shows up unannounced to surprise him. And, it just one thing leads to another. And it's just the worst possible scenario that could happen. And it makes you wonder, what if she didn't want to surprise him? Could they have lived happily ever after? Could he shifted his thought process? And because it was going so well, but because of her decision to go visit him at
this one tiny mistake. Yeah,
because as we described, his place is a disgusting killer den. And she's and he's he's really adamant, don't, I'm not I don't want you to come in. Like, I got to clean, or, he's making up all these excuses. But of course,
she finds her way in.
She finds her way in. The little door
she wants
gets
to get, she wants to get close to him.
Yeah.
And she did.
She gets close. And
yeah.
So, you think about, victims in this movie. There's a few, maybe more than a few, but it's sad where it ends up. But it's almost to a point where you almost, like, after she is the second victim, you think about, okay, where can this go from now? Like, is he gonna like put it down now and just put that behind him? But no, it's just things like the news starts catching up on, like, they're missing, and things go crazy. And
well, it doesn't help that the cat is telling him to like embrace his dark side. It's like, oh, you want to kill. It's how you feel alive. That's when you feel the most alive.
That's what the cat, is like, I've killed before, and it's great, isn't it? Or like trying to really convince him, like, it's good.
Yeah, and then the dog is like, no, don't listen to him. You don't have to do that. You can still save yourself, or something like that.
It's a mistake you'd had. It was just a mistake,
and I mean, there's no other way to really end the film, and this is not a character that has enough savvy to outrun the cops, to blend in again with another, like, society, town, city, country.
Yeah.
Like, he's got his limits, right?
Yeah, right.
And so when he hits his limit and he's about to be caught, there is this choice he has to make. And the choice, the moment comes from the voices.
Yeah.
The dog is what sets him over the edge, because the dog says, no, there's no hope for you.
Yeah.
This is the end of the line.
When the dog says that, it's serious.
It's really
he's
serious.
Take it serious too, yeah.
And so by the end of it all, he comes down to this ultimate decision of, self-preservation and survival instinct, or to take what the dog said, what his good voice is telling him, and step up and really stop it once and for all.
Right.
And the dark comedy never leaves, because as we're watching this ultimately sad moment in reality, the cat's voice comes in and goes, Jerry, we could have filled like 6 fridges or 10 fridges or something like that. And it's like, God damn. Like, even at the very last moment, that evil side of his brain, that bad side of his brain is like, get up, run out of the building, save yourself.
Yep.
We could fill 10 fridges.
Yeah, and you think about that too, and clearly the damage has been done already. He's done what he's done. He's killed his victims, but yeah, like you said, that voice is still in there. But ultimately, you could see it as a happy ending, if for him at least, which is kind of weird to say.
Well, the credits say so.
The credits definitely say so, and you almost I know a lot of people online were saying they hated the ending. I personally thought it was great. Yeah.
Do you know why they hated the ending?
I think it's because it was too much of a 180 to them. But this whole movie was a bunch of turns and twists that
you couldn't say it's too much of a 180 because the entire film is about the 180.
And I think it has to do with how much the movie does a good job of making you care for him. That I think they didn't like the fact that he basically
but what was his reality going to be? He couldn't. There's nowhere
to go.
Coming back from how
whatever
far he'd
fictional
gone.
world this was, maybe he could have, escaped and got away for a while. But ultimately,
no,
the movie
this was the
like
end.
The evidence was coming. Yeah, the cop even on the TV was like, "We're gonna get you," but that was kind of him imagining that, So he's like, he's basically kind of came to. I think that was the moment he came to terms that, like, I'm done too.
Yeah. And
I saw the news report and all that.
And I think that the credits are really, really bizarre.
Yes, let's go into that.
We could talk about it like for the next half hour, and it's still going to throw you for a loop when you see it. But the credits is this weird like musical number where he's dancing, and he's dancing with his victims, but they're happy, and it's like it's almost like a 70s style musical, and the music, and it didn't hit me until the second time I watched it, but this is all happening in his head as he's dying. And these are the last bits of memory that he has, and this is what he's doing to convince himself that everything's going to be okay. That's how he's gonna calm himself down to keep himself from running out of the building or trying to save himself. Is that everything's going to be okay. Everything's happy. Everything's great. You're stopping it before it gets worse, so it's going to be better. And there's even this part in the music where he's singing. Ryan Reynolds is singing, and I had to like watch it and pay attention. But there's a line where it's just saying like the lyric is happy, happy, happy music, happy music. That's
just
it.
So basic.
That's
just
it.
so basic. Like it's. And, with the appearance of Jesus.
Oh, driving the forklift?
Driving a forklift that starts lifting and then like as if, I think that's symbolic he's going to heaven. Or
yeah,
at least
he's finally, he thinks he is, and
Yeah.
at least he's finally have died.
I think
died.
there's underlying message with that too, especially with the comments about like the archangels in the earlier part of the movie and that like how religion could also add to the damaging, like if someone is in a mental state where they're not stable and then adding that in there. I think it's a sort of a subtle underlying message that's kind of sort of anti-religion. It does more harm than good kind of thing.
Oh,
at least that's kind of
interesting.
what I thought at that point because I was like, why are they showing Jesus? Well, obviously it's the heaven thing, but there's some biblical references earlier too. So he was probably raised in his childhood about
Absolutely, and he
so
does
he's mixing all of that learning together.
And that brings
lifestyle.
to mind this one interesting little scene where he's getting ready for bed.
Yeah.
And he does his bedtime prayer.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's really strange because he's a grown ass man, but he's standing in his tidy whities,
yeah, he's
and his undershirt.
Mm-hmm.
And when he goes to kneel at the foot of at his bedside, he does it in this way that's like a child. Like a child would do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he might as well be 8 years old and he's, praying and he's doing this prayer that's so fast because he's just doing it from memory.
Right. Like it just doesn't have any meaning. It's just something he did and was ingrained in him as a child.
But it tells you so many things. I think that's why this movie is so great and why it sticks with me for so long after I've watched it, and why I really wanted to do an episode on it was because there's so many layers to every scene and every action that this film is telling you at least 3 different things with every scene that it's putting on your plate.
Totally. Yeah. I totally agree with that. And and I do recommend watching it twice because there's things you miss. I think there's some symbolism in scenes that I didn't catch the first time. So maybe like with the bowling alley thing, maybe there's something more to that hasn't been really delved into or talked about as much. But I guess only the writers and director know. But
it's a wonder how it didn't do so well in the box office.
That's what we were talking about that a little bit before the episode. Like it was $11 million budget.
Damn.
And didn't even make $500,000.
Oh, crushed.
And it goes back to just like how much and this is Lionsgate distributed by too, and it was at Sundance, and normally types of films do well. Yeah, so I'm not so sure why it was just bad timing. Maybe some executives didn't want to put enough effort in the marketing aspect for it.
Yeah, you were saying it earlier before we started recording that the marketing was just non-existent, and without your marketing you're not going to have an audience. So you can't. I mean, are you really surprised? Can you be really surprised that like it only made $500,000 if you're not really even going to invest in the marketing?
And they, Ryan Reynolds and Anna Kendrick, they were basically household names already. So
it should have been an easy sell.
It should have been an easy sell. It's like something maybe they just failed on. What was the reasoning for that? But I mentioned it. It's under the radar. If you're a horror film fan, psychological thriller, pretty much it hits all those points. Dark comedy, even. I'm a huge dark comedy fan, so it really, I enjoyed every aspect of it. I think it deserves a little bit more credit than it seems to have at this point in time. But it's on Netflix, so hey, you can watch it on there. And as you discovered it,
show it some love.
Yeah,
because I mean, so what if there's no like marketing on it? It's a fucking good film.
Yeah.
Really awesome storytelling, delivery, acting, composition. I mean, top to bottom, cast and crew did an amazing job on this. And if you're a dark comedy fan, if you're a horror fan, even if you're just an Anna Kendrick or a Ryan Reynolds fan,
totally.
like give this movie some love and give it a couple of views. Why not?
Yeah, I ended up buying it on Vudu.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, to watch it on there just so I can pull it up. So yeah, it's definitely gonna go on my list during the coming months here in October. Halloween, I try to like expose my other group of friends like to films that they haven't seen before. This
Yeah.
is definitely going on the list, and it's a great film to watch with others too. I like to kind of throw that in there. Usually I like to watch horror films with others too because it can be kind of scary and jarring sometimes.
Well, I also
It's
like to ride that roller coaster ride with other
you're
people.
experiencing
It's
it with
really
others.
exciting. Yeah.
So if you get the chance to do it, to watch it with others, if they can stomach it, I know some friends of mine can't, so they will just not watch movies
They'll be
like
okay.
this. But
They'll
yeah,
be okay.
exactly. They'll be all right. So yeah, so as you can tell, we highly recommend this, and we're looking forward to doing another episode here of just another movie. Hopefully we can expose you to more movies like this where you may have not heard of them before. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you have movies that you've seen that maybe we haven't, that you think needs to get more love out there in the world, you can send us an email to guttedreviews@gmail.com, and we might just review it on a future episode. Also, just for those of you who are watching on our YouTube channel, you can also listen to previous episodes as in a podcast format. You can go to Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
Yeah.
We have a couple of platforms out there that you guys can listen to it on.
Most of the major ones, yeah.
Yeah,
For sure.
and if you're listening to the audio side as the podcast format, just know that there is a video component where you can hop on over to YouTube and check us out there.
Yeah. So yeah, again, check out the movie, and we'll looking forward to the next episode. We'll see
Yeah.
you next time.
We'll see you next time.